Welcome, Clay. Clay Smolinski from Platinum Asset Management, Portfolio Manager here. Clay, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Today we just want to talk a little bit about technology around the medical and healthcare sectors. Obviously there's lots of technologies coming and the like. Can you give us some insight into how you're looking at this from an investment perspective?
Yeah, certainly. Look, we have a specialist healthcare fund, and this is one of the major themes running through the holdings in the fund, how technology is advancing and changing healthcare. So let's think of an example, and one of the more interesting changes and technologies that we think going forward will be is this move to personalised medicine. So what is that? So let's think about cancer. So I think in the past when treating cancers, we used to always think about it as in a localised sense. All right, you had breast cancer, this is the treatment. You have colon cancer, this is the treatment. But today, the philosophy around treating cancer is no longer that. We don't think about it in a localised sense. We think about it more around the specific cancer mutation. So we have a mutation like the TRK gene. It used to be just thought that was present in colon cancer, but now, as technology has improved, we now know that it shows up in breast cancer, lung cancer, many different formats. So what we're now moving to a world is where we are basically testing for these specific cancer mutations, and we're now building these databases of these mutations and saying, all right, this is a certain type of mutation, this is the best treatment plan, and this was the outcome across many different patients. So we're now moving to a world where if there's an issue, you give a blood test, you go and get your blood sampled and tested for these rare mutations, and then a treatment plan is built off that. So who are the interesting companies in this field? And there are a couple. So there's a company called Foundation Medicine, and they are the company that's really behind building that underlying database. So they have this data of 20,000 use cases around cancer patients in the past, and that is very key around building future tests. And the second big way to play this is a company called QIAGEN, and QIAGEN is what we would call a sequencing company. So they are a company that build these underlying tests to say, all right, if we take the sample, how do we test it against for these mutations? Right. So they build the underlying test, and also QIAGEN builds a lot of what we would call lab automation equipment. So we no longer have people, needing to do these time-consuming tests. Yeah. You just take the sample and essentially feed it into a machine. Yeah. And that's important because we can do a lot more tests, but also it brings the cost down. So this technology and this testing can become far more widespread. Look, it's very interesting because once you're now personalising the treatment to your own genetic makeup and the specifics around the mutation, the cancer mutation that you may have, we're seeing that the outcomes are so much better. So we think there'll be a constant push towards this personalised medicine, not only in the treatment of cancer, but a whole range of ailments.
And I guess that's the difficulty with the being personalised is the cost for the companies to, everyone's different, and that would, the cost, I guess, for research and development is massive for lots of these pharmaceutical companies.
And that's absolutely correct. So if you think about, we see that, so one of a push in the field of healthcare is this idea of immunotherapy. It's using drugs that interact with your own immune system to fight these cancerous cells or whatever it may be. But the trial periods and the complexity of running those trials has just ramped up like a hockey stick, which is increasing the cost of a lot of these treatments. So there needs to be, the players like QIAGEN are now leading the forefront to try and bring that down. Right.
What about things like radiology or imaging and things like that? Obviously, there's companies that participate in those areas. Yes. Is there technology that's improving those sorts of things?
Yeah. So here we just see, I would say it's more just on that natural technology curve of where we're seeing circa 10% to 15% style improvements each year. And you think a lot of the costs around this imaging, so you have the quality of the underlying image, but also the cost of the equipment to do it. And if you go to speak to a pathology lab or an imaging lab, they say, well, I've got a $1.5 million piece of equipment here, I need to utilise it. Yeah. So if you can bring down the cost of the underlying piece of equipment or reduce the time that it takes to get an image. So, you do an MRI, it takes 40 minutes. If you can take that to 15 minutes, well, suddenly you can treat a lot more people and bring the overall cost down to the system.
Terrific. Clay, thank you very much for your insight, and we'll see how the technology improves over time.
You're welcome.